Welcome to Restory Nights, where history helps you fall asleep. Before the highways and skyscrapers, before the hum of modern sleep, there were quiet stories buried beneath the soil of time. Tonight, let's wander through America's forgotten hours, where history whispers softly and dreams remember.
The world slows to a whisper. In the cities, the great electric heart of America beats a little softer. The final train pulls into its station with a sigh of steel and air, and the last echoes of hurried footsteps fade from the pavement. Along quiet, tree-lined streets in the suburbs, porch lights blink out one by one, leaving the houses to dream under the gentle watch of the moon. Out on the vast plains and in the silent valleys, where darkness is an older and deeper thing, the land settles into a quiet that has existed for millennia. The hum of the 21st century, a constant vibrating note of progress and energy, finally begins to recede. The world sleeps. But silence is never truly empty. As the noise of the present day pulls back like a receding tide, another sound begins to surface. It is not a sound you can hear with your ears alone, but one you feel in the stillness of the air, in the quiet chambers of your own drifting mind. It is the gentle stirring of forgotten centuries. This is the hour when the past awakes. It does not come as a ghost, rattling its chains, but as a soft, pervasive echo, rising like mist from the soil of time. Listen. Can you hear it? Beneath the distant hum of a refrigerator or the soft sigh of central air, there is another, older sound. It is the deep, resonant creak of wood, the sound of immense timber shifting under a patient, heavy load. It is the sound of ships, not the steel giants of today, but the wooden vessels that were the cradles of a new world. Imagine yourself standing on a stone quay in a harbor that has long since been filled in, a place where a skyscraper now stands. The year is not tonight. It is a night in the late 17th, or perhaps early 18th century. The air is cool and smells of salt, damp rope, and the sharp, clean scent of pine tar. The water in the harbor is a sheet of black glass, reflecting a sliver of moon and a handful of scattered, indifferent stars. Moored in the darkness are the ships, their tall masts like a forest of leafless trees. They are not empty. They are resting, filled with the slumbering weight of their long journey. Each one is a vessel of dreams, and as the tide gently lifts and lowers their heavy bodies, they speak. That deep groaning creak is the sound of an oak beam hewn by hand in an English forest, settling against its wooden pegs. It is the sound of the ship's hull remembering the immense rolling power of the Atlantic. For weeks, this vessel was a world unto itself, a small, self-contained universe of hope and fear, tossed on an endless ocean. Now, in the calm of the harbor, it seems to sigh in its sleep. The ropes that hold it fast to the shore strain and sing a low, mournful song, a quiet hum that travels from the wood of the ship to the stone of the dock, a vibration that settles deep into the land itself. The sound is a lullaby of arrival, a final weary exhalation after a long-held breath. It is the sound of a beginning, resting in the darkness before the hard work of a new day, a new life, in a new world. Now let the sound of the harbor fade and listen for something quieter still. Move from the water's edge up a cobblestone street no wider than a cart path to a house with small leaded glass windows. Inside, the air is still and cool. The family is asleep, their slow, even breaths the only rhythm in the deep quiet of the home. Here, the darkness is not absolute. On a small wooden table, a single flame trembles at the top of a tallow candle. This is the hush of candlelight. It is a silence that is alive. Unlike the steady, sterile glare of a modern bulb, this light breathes. The flame, a tiny spear of gold, dances and sways with currents of air you cannot feel. It lengthens and shrinks, casting shadows that move with a slow, hypnotic grace. The back of a simple wooden chair becomes a tall, distorted specter on the wall. The spinning wheel in the corner seems to sigh as a shadow deepens and then recedes within its spokes. The light is soft, intimate. It illuminates only a small circle of the world, a well-worn Bible on the table, its pages filled with family history, a pewter cup glowing with a dull silver warmth, a half-finished piece of knitting, the needles resting as if tired from their work. Everything outside this small bubble of light is a gentle, undefined darkness. The candle does not conquer the night, it simply makes a small, temporary peace with it. And the sound, or lack of it, is profound. The flame consumes the wax and wick with a tiny, almost inaudible whisper. It is the sound of transformation, of solid matter turning into light and heat. It is the sound of patient, quiet industry. This is the light by which letters were written, by which children were born, by which the weary read a single verse before surrendering to sleep. It is a living silence, a hush that holds within it all the quiet hopes, fears, and prayers of the generations who lived by its gentle flickering glow. This soft, breathing light is a heartbeat in the deep chest of the night, a quiet testament to endurance in a world surrounded by a vast and wild darkness. Step away from the candle and listen again for something even more subtle. It is the gentle hum of an age that never truly ended. This is not one sound, but the symphony of 1,000 quiet things, the ambient noise of a world not yet filled with the roar of engines. It is the whisper of wind moving through the pines of a forest that once stood where a highway now runs. The trees speak a language of needles and cones, a soft, shushing sound that has carried the secrets of the seasons for centuries. It is the murmur of a river, its waters flowing over smooth stones, a sound that has told the same story since the last ice age, a story of patience and persistence. It is the distant, lonely call of a whippoorwill from a dark meadow, a sound of wildness and solitude. It is the almost imperceptible scratch of a quill pen on heavy, fibrous paper as a lone scholar in a cold room records his thoughts on liberty, his words destined to change the course of history, written in the quietest hours of the night. This collective hum is the sound of a world powered by natural forces. It is the creak of a leather hinge, the sigh of a floorboard settling in an old house, the gentle rhythm of a sleeping person's breath. These are the sounds that were buried, layer by layer, under the noise of progress. They were covered by the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, then the chuff of the steam engine, the roar of the factory, and finally the pervasive electronic hum of our own time. But these sounds never truly vanished. They were simply absorbed. They settled into the earth, into the wood of the old houses, into the collective memory of the land itself. The creak of the wooden ships is still there, a ghost of a vibration deep beneath the concrete foundations of the harborfront buildings. The hush of candlelight still lingers in the quiet corners of old rooms, in the way the moonlight falls through a modern window pane. The gentle hum of the wind in the ancient forest can still be heard in the rustle of leaves in a city park. And so, as you lie here on the edge of sleep, you are not alone in the silence. You are surrounded by the echoes of those who came before. The very ground beneath you is a library of forgotten hours. The night has peeled back the loud, insistent page of the present, and for a little while you are free to read the gentler, quieter verses that came before. This is the night the past awakes. It does not come as a ghost, rattling its chains, but as a soft, pervasive echo, rising like mist from the soil of time. Let the echoes carry you now into a sleep where history is not a lesson to be learned, but a dream to be remembered.
Let us drift back now, further into the quiet of the night, to a time when the continent itself was still dreaming, before the first cities drew their grids upon the shore, before the clang of bells and the rumble of carriage wheels. There was the harbor. But it was not a harbor as we know it. It was a place of profound and patient silence, a gateway between two worlds guarded only by the moon and the tide. Tonight, the long, violent conversation with the Atlantic is over. For weeks, for months, the ocean has been a thing of constant roaring sound and relentless motion. It was a beast that battered the wooden hull of the ship, its waves like great green fists pounding against the oak. Its winds shrieked through the rigging, a high, keening song that never ceased, a sound that worked its way into the bones and became the soundtrack of every waking and sleeping moment. The world was a chaotic, tilting, groaning place, a small, fragile bubble of human life in an endless, angry sea. But tonight, all of that is a memory, a ghost of motion that still flickers in the muscles of the weary. The anchor, a great, heavy piece of iron forged in a world they have left forever, has plunged into the cold, dark water and found its grip in the mud and sand below. The ship, which has fought the ocean for so long, has finally surrendered to a different rhythm. It has come to rest. This is the silent harbor. Here the Atlantic is no longer a beast. It has become a living lullaby. The great slow lung of the ocean still breathes, but its breath is gentle now. The water lifts the ship, holds it for a long, soft moment, and then lowers it with an almost imperceptible sigh. It is a cradle rocked by the hand of the sea, a final, gentle motion to soothe the exhausted and the anxious. Imagine the feeling. Aboard the ship, in the cramped, dark space below deck, 100 souls are suspended in this gentle rhythm. For the first time in months, there is no need to brace against a sudden lurch, no need to wedge oneself into a corner to keep from being thrown. The body, so long tensed for battle, can finally unclench. The deep, gnawing fatigue of the journey begins to settle, a weight heavier than any sea chest. The sounds are different now, too. The roar of the open ocean has been replaced by a library of silence, its pages filled with quiet, intimate noises. There is the soft, rhythmic lap-lap-lapping of small waves against the hull, a sound like a gentle, persistent heartbeat. There is the low, sleepy creak of the timbers, not the violent groan of a ship in a storm, but the contented sigh of a house settling in the night. From above, the ropes in the rigging, now slack, occasionally hum a low note as a breeze drifts off the unseen land. And woven through it all is the sound of sleeping humanity, the soft breath of a child, a muffled cough from a nearby bunk, the rustle of a straw mattress as a dreamer turns. These are the settlers, and they are caught in the most profound of in-between moments. They have arrived, but they have not yet landed. Their journey is over, but their work has not yet begun. They float in the darkness, a stone's throw from a world they have only ever seen in their minds. For tonight, the land they have sacrificed everything for is not a place of soil and trees. It is a promise, a scent on the air,
a wall of blackness that rises just beyond the ship's railing. A father, let us call him Thomas, lies awake, his eyes open in the darkness. He listens to the gentle rocking and the lapping water. His body is exhausted, but his mind is a whirlwind. He can feel the phantom weight of the plow he sold, the memory of his hands on its familiar wooden handles. He thinks of the 6 children he and his wife have brought across this vast ocean, all of them sleeping now in the stale, close air. He came here for them, for a patch of earth that would be his own, free from the crushing rents and the worn-out soil of the old country. His dream is not of gold or glory, but of the simple, back-breaking work of building something that will last. He smells the air drifting from the shore, a cool, damp scent of pine needles and wet earth, so different from the familiar smells of home. It is the scent of his future, and it is both thrilling and terrifying. The rocking of the ship is a comfort, but it is also a reminder that he is still adrift, his family's fate floating in this silent, unknown water. A few feet away, his wife, Eleanor, is also awake. Her journey was not just across an ocean, but across a landscape of loss. She thinks of the small stone churchyard she left behind, of the graves of her parents she will never see again, of the small garden she tended, of the faces of the neighbors she will never again greet on a Sunday morning. Her hands, resting on the thin wool blanket, instinctively clench, as if searching for something to hold on to. Her dream is quieter than her husband's. It is a dream of a hearth, of a solid floor beneath her feet that does not move. It is a dream of her children growing up safe, with full bellies and a roof that does not leak. She listens to the water, the gentle lullaby, and for a moment it feels like a mother's comforting hand. But it is also the sound of a great and permanent separation. She has been rocked to sleep by very thing that has carried her away from everything she ever knew. And their youngest son, perhaps he is named Samuel, is not thinking of the future or the past. He is dreaming. In his sleep, he is still on the open ocean, but the waves are not frightening. They are green, rolling hills, and the ship is a great, gentle horse carrying him across a field of water. In his dream, the new land is not a dark, silent forest, but a place filled with impossibly tall trees that bear loaves of bread and rivers that flow with milk. His is the simple, perfect dream of a child, unburdened by the weight of mortgages or memories. He is not a settler. He is an adventurer, and this silent harbor is just a pause before the next chapter of the great story begins. Outside, the moon traces a path of liquid silver across the water. The ship, with its sleeping and its waking and its dreaming souls, is a small dark shape against this shimmering light. It is a seed pod blown across an ocean, waiting to open. It is filled with the potent, fragile seeds of a new nation. The land itself is the greatest silence of all. It is a vast, living presence that has been here for an eon waiting. Its silence is not empty. It is full of the rustle of unseen animals, the whisper of wind through a billion leaves, the patient, slow-motion growth of trees that were ancient when the ship was just a sapling in a distant forest. This is a land that has its own stories, its own lullabies etched in stone and bark. Tonight, it watches the strange wooden creature that has appeared in its waters and listens to the new human heartbeats that pulse within it. Long before the age of engines, this was the sound of arrival. It was not the roar of a jet engine or the blast of a foghorn. It was the slow, gentle pivot from the violence of the journey to the peace of the destination. It was the living lullaby of the Atlantic, rocking the cradles of a nation yet to be born. It was the quiet, sacred hour in the silent harbor when a handful of settlers, floating between a lost past and an unknown future, dreamed of a land they had yet to name, and in the stillness, the land dreamed of them too. Let us pull away from the shore now, leaving the gentle rocking of the silent harbor behind. Our journey tonight is not across the water, but into the deep green heart of the land itself. We drift back further, to a time long before the first wooden ships had even been imagined, before their sails were a whisper on the distant horizon. We travel to a time when the continent was defined not by its coasts, but by its endless, breathing forests. Before the roads, before the farms, before the cities, there was the wood. It was not a barrier to be crossed or a resource to be claimed. It was the world. From the edge of the great Eastern Ocean to the banks of the wide Mississippi, it was a single, unbroken canopy, a living cathedral of trees that had stood for thousands of years. The sky was not a vast open thing, but a place you glimpsed in fragments, a mosaic of blue and white, seen through a high ceiling of green needles and broad leaves. To walk into this forest was to step into a different kind of time. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth, of decaying leaves, of the sharp, clean perfume of pine resin. The light was soft and dappled, falling in shifting patterns on a floor of moss and ancient tangled roots. The silence here was deeper than the silence of the harbor. It was the quiet of a place that had learned its own rhythms over the course of eons. It was a silence composed of a million tiny sounds: the drip of water from a fern, the distant tap-tap-tapping of a woodpecker, the scurry of a chipmunk over dry leaves, and above all, the constant, gentle whisper of the wind. It was in this world, beneath the pines and the oaks and the maples, that the first Americans lived. They did not fight the forest. They were a part of it. Their presence was a light one, a footstep as soft as a falling leaf. They moved through the great woods not as conquerors, but as listeners. Their lives were a long, patient conversation with the land, and in that conversation they spoke to the wind. This was not a language of idle words. To speak to the wind was first to listen to it. The wind was a storyteller, a messenger, a constant companion. In its voice they could hear the changing of the seasons. A sharp, cold whisper from the north spoke of the coming snows, a time to draw close to the fire and to the stories of the elders. A warm, humid breath from the south carried the promise of rain and the scent of new life, a time for planting and for hope. The wind told them where the deer were moving, its currents carrying the faintest scent of the herd. It told them when a storm was gathering, its sudden silence a warning more potent than any thunderclap. To speak back to the wind was to live in harmony with these messages. It was to build a shelter in a place the wind would pass by gently. It was to plant your corn where the wind would not tear it down. It was to offer a quiet prayer of thanks, your words lifted from your lips and carried up through the high branches, becoming another note in the forest's endless song. The stories of the people were also given to the wind. Around a crackling fire in the heart of the woods, as the sparks danced upward to meet the stars, an elder would speak. He would tell the story of the world's creation, of the great turtle that carried the land on its back. He would tell of the clever coyote who stole fire for the people, or the great bear who taught them the secrets of healing herbs. These words were not meant to be trapped within walls. As he spoke, the wind would catch them, pulling them into the darkness,
weaving them through the rustle of the leaves, so that the story became a part of the forest itself. A child, waking in the night, might hear the wind's low murmur and imagine it was the voice of the great turtle, still telling its ancient tale. The stories lived not in books, but in the air itself. But some stories were meant to last longer than a single telling. Some were meant to be anchored to the world, etched into its very skin. They were written not with ink, but with the sharp edge of a stone. Imagine a trail, a path no wider than a deer's, winding through the deep woods. It is a path that has been walked for generations, and on the smooth, pale bark of a great beech tree there is a mark. It is a simple carving, the shape of a fish, its nose pointing downstream. To a stranger, it is a mystery, but for those who knew the language of the forest, it was a library of information. It meant that the river was near. It meant that the fishing was good in that direction. It was a message of welcome, of sustenance, a quiet assurance to the weary traveler that they were on the right path, that provision was ahead. Further on, a carving of a serpent might warn of a difficult, winding passage. The symbol of a turtle might mark a place of peace and safety. These were not words, but ideas, etched into the living wood, a story that grew and aged with the tree itself, the bark slowly closing around the mark, holding the memory deep within. And some stories were too large, too sacred for the bark of a single tree. These were saved for the stone. High on a cliff face, overlooking a river valley, is a canvas of rock that has been baking in the sun for 10,000 years. And upon this rock, the people left their most important whispers. These were the stories of creation, of the spirits that lived in the sky and the earth. Here you might see the shape of a great spiraling circle, a symbol of the sun, of life, of the turning of the seasons. You might see the form of a man with the head of a deer, a shaman story of a journey into the spirit world. You might see a pattern of dots and lines that perfectly mirrors the constellations of the winter sky, a map of the heavens brought down to earth. This was a library of stone, its pages open to the sky. Let us imagine a young girl, perhaps her name is Fawn, standing before this wall of rock with her grandfather. The sun is low, casting the carvings in sharp relief. Her grandfather's hand, wrinkled and brown as an oak leaf, traces the shape of a great bird with outstretched wings. He says, "This is the thunderbird. He brings the rain for the corn. His eyes are the lightning, and his voice is the thunder you hear echoing in the mountains. He is a great spirit, powerful and life-giving. This story was carved by your grandmother's grandmother's grandmother so that we would never forget to be thankful for the storm." Fawn touches the cool, rough stone. She is not just looking at a picture. She is touching a story that is a part of her, a link in a chain that stretches back into the deep, quiet past. She looks from the stone bird to the vast sky, and she understands they are connected. The world is not a collection of separate things, but a single, immense story, and she has a place within it. These whispers beneath the pines and upon the stones are still here. The wind that moves through the trees tonight is the same wind that carried the elders' stories. The great forests are gone, replaced by fields and towns and cities. But in the parks, in the quiet woods at the edge of town, in the lone pine tree standing in a suburban backyard, that same ancient voice murmurs. The trail markers have been absorbed into the trees. The stone carvings have been faded by centuries of sun and rain, but they have not vanished. They are a part of the land's memory. So, as you drift toward sleep, listen. Listen past the sounds of your home, past the distant noise of the modern world. Listen for the whisper of the leaves outside your window. It is more than just the wind. It is an echo, carried across the centuries. It is the story of a people who knew the language of the forest, who wrote their history in the living skin of the world. It is a lullaby, not of words, but of the deep, enduring spirit of the land itself.
Let the whispers of the ancient forest fade into the soft soil, and let us drift forward in time to an age when the scattered settlements have grown into towns, and the rough-hewn cabins have been joined by brick houses that line cobblestone streets. The silence is different now. It is no longer the deep, organic quiet of the primeval woods, but the structured silence of a sleeping town, a quiet punctuated by the distant chime of a clock tower or the lonely footfalls of the night watchman. The colonies are stirring, not with the noise of armies, not yet. The revolution does not begin with the roar of a cannon, but with the scratching of a pen, with a hushed conversation in the back room of a tavern, with a thought that takes root in the quietest hours of the night. It begins like a single candle being lit in a dark and drafty room. Imagine a printer's shop in Philadelphia. The great, heavy press stands silent, a sleeping giant in the center of the room. The air smells of paper and lead and the sharp, oily scent of ink. The city outside is dark, its windows like vacant eyes. But here, in this small workshop, a single flame burns. It is a tallow candle, its light soft and yellow, and by its gentle glow, a man is working. He is not a soldier. His hands are stained not with gunpowder, but with ink. He stands before a wooden case, its dozens of small compartments filled with tiny metal letters. His movements are precise and quiet. With a pair of tweezers, he plucks a single letter, a T, then an H, then an E from its compartment and places it into his composing stick. Click. The sound is no louder than a cricket's chirp. He picks another. Click. And another. He is setting type for a pamphlet, a collection of words that in the morning will seem as harmless as any other printed page. But these words are not harmless. They are ideas, ideas about liberty, about the rights of ordinary people, about the very nature of kings and governments. In this quiet room, under the watchful eye of a single, trembling flame, he is building a weapon. Each metal letter is a piece of ammunition. Each carefully formed sentence is an act of defiance. The candlelight flickers, and for a moment, the man's face is cast in shadow. He is tired. His back aches, and his eyes burn from straining in the dim light. There is fear in this room. He knows the words he is setting are dangerous. They are sedition, treason. A single knock on the door, a heavy footstep in the street outside could mean the end of his life, the ruin of his family. But he continues his work. Click, click, click. The flame of the candle trembles with the draft from the window, but it does not go out. It holds its ground, a tiny, fragile spear of light in the immense darkness. And in the same way, the courage in the printer's heart trembles, but it does not fail. It is a quiet courage, a stubborn courage. He is not shouting his defiance in the town square. He is whispering it, letter by letter, onto a page that will be passed from hand to hand, read in taverns and homes and workshops, lighting 1,000 other small fires in the minds of his countrymen. His candle is not just for seeing, it is for understanding. Now let us travel from the city out into the countryside of Massachusetts. Here, a lone farmhouse stands dark against a field of stars. Inside, by the soft, red glow of the dying embers in the hearth, a woman sits in a rocking chair. The rest of her family is asleep.
their quiet breaths a gentle rhythm in the house. But she is not sleeping. In her lap is a homespun coat, its blue wool frayed at the cuff, a button missing from the front. It is the uniform of a Minuteman, her husband's, her son's, her brother's. Her work is as quiet as the printer's. The only sound is the soft shush of a needle and thread passing through the thick wool. Stitch by stitch she mends the fabric, her hands moving with a familiar, practiced grace. Each stitch is an act of hope. Each repaired seam is a prayer for the safety of the man who will wear this coat. She does not know where he is tonight. Perhaps he is sleeping in a cold barn or standing watch on a lonely road, his musket held close. She thinks of the cause they are fighting for, a word, freedom, that is spoken in hushed tones, a concept as new and fragile as the nation they hope to build. The work is slow. The light from the embers is just enough to see by. It casts a warm, gentle glow on her hands and on the rough blue fabric. It is not a bright light. It is a light of endurance, a light that holds its warmth deep inside, even as the world outside grows cold and dark. Her courage is not the courage of the battlefield. It is the quiet, unyielding courage of waiting, of worrying, of holding a family and a home together while the world threatens to tear itself apart. It is the courage of mending what is broken, of preparing for a dawn she can only imagine. Her love, her fear, her hope, they burn with the soft, steady glow of the embers in the hearth, a fire that will not be extinguished by the long, dark night. And in the back rooms, in the cellars, in the quiet barns throughout the colonies, other lights are burning. Imagine a group of men gathered around a rough-hewn table. Their faces are serious, their voices low and urgent. Some are farmers, their hands calloused from the plow. Some are merchants, their clothes a little finer. Some are lawyers, their words precise and careful. The only light comes from a few tin lanterns, their sides pierced with small patterned holes. They sit on the table, casting strange, star-like patterns on the men's faces and on the low-beamed ceiling. The light is shielded, contained, a secret kept from the prying eyes of the night. Here, they speak of things that are punishable by death. They plan boycotts, they organize committees, they whisper of stockpiling weapons and drilling militias. Their voices are a low murmur, a sound easily lost in the chirp of crickets or the sigh of the wind outside. But in this small, protected circle of light, an idea of a nation is being forged. The lanterns are not just for illumination, they are a symbol of their shared secret, their common risk. Each man who sits in this circle of light has put his life, his family, and his fortune on the line. Their courage is a collective fire. Its heat contained within the thin walls of the lanterns, but its potential is immense. It is a trembling light, for they are all afraid, but it is an unyielding light, for they are all committed. The lanterns of revolution were not bonfires. They were small, scattered flames, tended in secret, glowing through the darkest nights of hope. A printer's candle, a woman's hearth, a conspirator's shielded lantern. Each one was a tiny point of defiance in the overwhelming darkness. Each one was a declaration that even in the most oppressive night, a single flame is a promise of the dawn. And as you drift off to sleep, imagine these lights scattered across the landscape of the past. See them glowing in the windows of colonial homes, moving silently through darkened barns, reflecting in the determined eyes of ordinary people who chose to do extraordinary things. The great battles and the famous speeches are the loudest parts of the story, but the revolution was sustained by these small, flickering lights, the small, personal flames of courage that, when brought together, burned brightly enough to light the way to a new world. They are the forgotten hours of history, still glowing softly, a gentle and eternal lantern for the sleeping land.
Let us leave the shielded lanterns of the towns behind and venture out into the vast, quiet spaces that lie between them. In this sleeping land, before the age of measured hours and minutes, time was not a thing kept in a pocket or hung on a wall. It was not a relentless ticking, a rigid march of seconds. Time was a distance. It was a rhythm. It was the story told by the roads. These were not roads of asphalt and concrete, laid down with the brute force of machines. They were suggestions, whispered upon the land. They began as the ancient winding paths of animals, the trails of deer and bison moving from watering hole to salt lick, a map drawn by instinct. They became the footpaths of the first peoples, softened by generations of moccasins. And then, slowly, they were widened by the newcomers, their purpose unfolding one journey at a time. These roads of dust and destiny were marked by the three great heartbeats of the new America: the step of worn boots, the beat of horse hooves, and the slow, groaning turn of the wagon wheel. First, listen for the quietest of the three sounds, the solitary rhythm of worn leather boots. Imagine a man walking alone through a forest in Pennsylvania. He is a circuit preacher, his Bible and a few days' worth of bread tucked into his satchel. The only sounds are the rustle of his own passage through the undergrowth and the steady, muffled beat of his boots on the soft, damp earth. Thump, thump, thump. His time is measured by the sun. When it is high overhead, he knows half the day is gone. When it sinks below the tree line, casting long golden fingers of light through the woods, he knows it is time to find shelter. He is not in a hurry. To hurry is to miss the world. His slow, steady pace allows him to see the small miracles of the forest, the flash of a bluebird's wing, the intricate pattern of moss on a fallen log, the way the light catches the dew on a spider's web. He is a thread stitching the scattered communities together with news and faith. The sermon he will deliver tomorrow in a small, unpainted church was first composed here, on this lonely road, his thoughts keeping time with the rhythm of his own footsteps. He carries news from the last village, of a birth, a marriage, a letter that has arrived from across the ocean. His journey is the slow, steady pulse of connection. The land does not rush him, and he does not rush the land. He is a part of its patient, unfolding story, and his worn boots leave a faint, almost invisible mark, a testament to a journey measured not in hours, but in contemplation. Now the rhythm quickens. Listen for the sound of hooves. It is a faster, more urgent beat, a conversation between iron and earth. Clop, clop, clop on the hard-packed dirt of the King's Highway in Virginia. Splash, splash, splash through a shallow, stony creek in the Carolinas. Imagine a young rider, his body moving in easy harmony with his horse. He is a postman, a carrier of the mail, entrusted with the fragile, paper-thin bonds that hold the colonies together. In his leather pouch are the whispers of a nation, a merchant's urgent order, a general's secret dispatch, a love letter folded and sealed with wax, its words carrying a world of hope and longing. The rider's world is a blur of motion. The trees whip past, the fields roll by like green and brown waves. He does not have time to notice the wildflowers, but he knows the soul of the road. He knows every dip and turn, every treacherous patch of mud, every great oak tree that serves as a landmark. His time is measured by the changing of horses at relay stations, by the distance between one town and the next.
He rides through the heat of the day and the chill of the night, the steady drumming of his horse's hooves a constant driving rhythm. It is the sound of news traveling, of a country beginning to think of itself as a single entity. It is faster than a man's walk, but it is still a pace that is tied to the living world. The rider feels the horse's fatigue as his own. He drinks from the same streams. He rests under the same moon. He is not a passenger in a machine. He is a partner in a journey, his destiny and his horses bound together by the long, dusty road. Finally, listen for the slowest, deepest, and most patient rhythm of all. It is the sound of the wagon wheel. It is a low, groaning creak of wood against wood, of an axle crying out for grease. It is the sound of an entire life, a whole future, being carried westward at the pace of a plodding ox. Imagine a family, their canvas-covered wagon, a small, solitary ship on the vast, rolling ocean of the prairie. The sound of their passage is the lullaby of migration. It is the slow, deliberate creak, groan of the wheels, a sound so constant it becomes a part of the silence. It is the soft plod of the oxen's hooves in the thick dust, the jingle of a chain, the occasional low call from the father urging the animals forward. Inside the wagon, a mother quiets her child, her humming blending with the rhythm of the wheels. A young boy peers out the back, watching the two thin lines of their tracks stretch back toward a life he is already beginning to forget. Their time is not measured by the sun, or even by the miles. It is measured by landmarks, by river crossings, by the distant sight of a mountain range that will take weeks to reach. This is the sound of destiny being made, not found. Every turn of the wheel is a monumental effort. Every mile is a victory against the immensity of the continent. The people in this wagon have packed their past into a few wooden chests and have set their faces toward a future that exists only in a pamphlet or a rumor. Their hope is a heavy thing, and the wagon groans under its weight. This slow, patient sound is the sound of America planting itself. It is the sound of a family not just passing through the land, but preparing to become a part of it. The dust that rises from their wheels is the soil of their future home. The rhythm of their journey is the first heartbeat of a new settlement, a new town, a new state. These three sounds, the boot, the hoof, the wheel, were the pulse of the growing nation. They were the sounds of a people in constant motion. A land that measured time in footsteps was a land that understood patience. A land that measured distance in the setting of the sun was a land that understood endurance. The roads of dust and destiny were not just a way to get from one place to another. They were the loom upon which the fabric of a new country was woven. So as you lie in the quiet of your room, let the rhythmic sounds of the modern world fade away. Forget the hum of electricity, the tick of the clock, and listen. You may just hear a fainter, older rhythm beneath it all. The steady beat of a traveler's heart, the patient gallop of a horse carrying a message of freedom, the slow, groaning, hopeful turn of a wagon wheel, moving ever westward, creaking out the slow, beautiful, and dusty song of a nation finding its way home.
Let us draw the curtain of the night a little closer now. The sounds of the open road have faded, and the land has settled into its deepest quiet. In this profound stillness, we turn from the grand movements of people to the quiet,
solitary journeys of the heart. For every story that was shouted, every declaration that was printed, there were a million others that were only ever whispered. Some of these whispers were meant for another's ear, but they were lost in the folds of time, becoming letters never sent. They are the most intimate hours of history, the quietest and most human of all. They exist in the space between the thought and the word, in the moments when a hand, guided by love or fear or longing, took up a pen and tried to bridge the vast silent distance separating one soul from another. Imagine first a soldier's encampment. The year is cold, the war for independence is long, and the hope for victory is a flickering, distant star. This is not a place of heroic charges or waving flags. It is a place of mud, of damp, threadbare blankets, and of a hunger that gnaws at the spirit as much as the belly. The camp is asleep, a field of exhausted men who look more like boys in the pale blue light of the moon. But in one tent, a young man is awake. His name might have been Daniel or James. History has forgotten it. He sits on an upturned crate, using a drumhead as his desk. A single sputtering candle stub, a treasure he has guarded for weeks, casts a weak dancing circle of light. In its glow, he is writing a letter. His fingers are stiff with cold, and the quill feels clumsy in his hand. The ink, thin and watery, threatens to freeze in its small pot. He is not writing to a general or a congressman. He is writing to a girl named Anne, a girl he left behind on a farm in New Hampshire. His letter does not speak of the grand ideals of liberty. It does not mention the speeches he has heard or the battles he has fought. It is a letter built of small, precious memories. He writes of the way her hair catches the light in the late afternoon sun. He writes of the taste of the wild strawberries they picked together on the hill behind her house. He asks if the old apple tree, the one they carved their initials into, survived the last winter's storm. He writes of his fear, but he couches it in hope. When I return, he writes, not if. When I return, we will build a small house by the creek. The war will be over, and we will live in a world of our own making. The words flow from him, a torrent of love and longing, a desperate attempt to create a small, warm space of memory in the midst of a cold, brutal reality. The scratch of his quill on the rough paper is the only sound, a tiny, determined whisper against the vast, sleeping silence of the war. He finishes the letter, the candle now burning dangerously low. He reads the words one last time, his lips moving silently, and for a moment he is not a soldier in a frozen camp. He is a boy on a sunlit hill, his heart full of a simple, perfect love. He carefully folds the paper, tucking it into the inner pocket of his worn coat, just over his heart. It will be sent with the next post rider in the morning. But the morning brings a sudden alarm, a skirmish in the woods, or hurried march through the snow. The letter stays in his pocket, a silent promise, a warm weight against his chest. It stays there through the long, hard days that follow. It is still there when he falls, not in a great and glorious battle, but from a fever that sweeps through the camp, a quiet, merciless phantom. The letter is never sent. It remains in his pocket as he is laid to rest in a shallow, unmarked grave. Over the seasons, the wool of his coat will fray and unravel. The paper will soften and darken with the damp earth. The ink, once full of meaning, will fade and blur, its words dissolving back into the elements. The love, the hope, the dream of a small house by the creek, they are not lost. They are simply absorbed by the land, a quiet, tender story that becomes part of the soil of the new nation, a love letter from a hand that never saw the dawn of the freedom he fought for. Now let us move to another quiet room, in another time. The war is over. A new century has begun. A woman sits at a small, elegant writing desk in a fine house in Charleston. The air is warm and heavy with the scent of jasmine from the garden outside. Her name is Eleanor, and she is a widow, her husband lost not to war, but to the sea. She is writing to her son, a young man who has gone west, beyond the mountains, to make his fortune in the wild, untamed lands of Kentucky. She has not heard from him in nearly a year. Her letter is full of the news of the town, the price of cotton, a neighbor's wedding, the slow, predictable turning of the seasons. But as she writes, the careful wall of her composure begins to crumble. The polite words give way to a mother's confession. She writes of her loneliness, of the way the grand, empty house echoes with the ghosts of her husband's laughter and her son's childhood footsteps. She confesses her deepest fear, that the wild land he has gone to has swallowed him whole, that she will never see his face again. I am proud of your courage, she writes, a tear splashing onto the page, smudging the ink. But my heart is a selfish thing. It wishes you had been less brave. It wishes you were here, safe within these walls, where my love could be a shield against the world. It is a letter of profound, aching love, a confession of the fear that lies beneath a mother's pride. She writes until the candle burns low and the first pale light of dawn begins to touch the sky. She feels a sense of release, having finally given voice to the anxieties that have haunted her sleepless nights. She seals the letter with a drop of blue wax, her hands trembling slightly, but she does not send it. She holds it in her hand, thinking of her son so far away. What good would it do to burden him with her own sadness? He needs to be strong, to be brave. Her fears would only be a weight upon his shoulders. With a heavy heart, she walks to the fireplace. She holds the letter over the dying embers of the night's fire. For a moment, she hesitates, her fingers stroking the paper that holds so much of her heart. Then she lets it go. She watches as the flame catches the corner of her words of love and fear into a brief bright light before they crumble into black, weightless ash. The confession is gone, the words are lost, but the love, the deep, silent current of it remains, an unspoken prayer that travels across the mountains, a silent maternal blessing for a son who will never know the depth of his mother's fear or the boundlessness of her love. These letters, and a million like them, are the quiet undercurrent of history. They are the stories that were too personal, too dangerous, or too heartbreaking to be told. They are the words that were written in the lonely hours when the soul felt safe enough to be honest. They were not read by the eyes they were meant for, but that does not mean they did not exist. For a fleeting moment, in a cold tent or a lonely room, a pure, unvarnished truth was captured on a page. They are the dreams of a nation, written by hands that did not always live to see them bloom. As you settle into your own quiet darkness, remember these silent folded papers. They are not artifacts of failure, but testaments to the deep human need to connect, to confess, to love. The words may be lost to time, but the feeling that guided the pen, that is a part of the air we breathe, a gentle, unseen presence in the soul of this sleeping land.
Let us drift away now from the folded pages of the past and travel to a quiet corner of Virginia where the gentle, rolling hills are stitched together with old stone fences and dotted with ancient oak trees. Here, set back from a modern road where cars hum by like fleeting whispers, stands a house. It is a simple, two-story home built of wood that has long since surrendered its paint to the sun and the rain, leaving it the soft, silvery gray of a weathered stone.
The porch sags a little to one side, as if tired from holding up the weight of so many years. The windows are dark, vacant eyes, their glass long gone, leaving them open to the wind and the leaves. To a passing glance, it is a ruin, a forgotten shell that is slowly, gracefully surrendering to the land. But this house is not empty. It is full. It is a vessel of time, its wooden walls saturated with the echoes of every life it ever sheltered. And if you listen, not with your ears, but with your heart, you can still hear it humming. The hum begins as a lullaby. Imagine stepping through the open doorway, not into a place of dust and decay, but into the house as it was a century and a half ago. The air is warm and smells of beeswax and wood smoke from the great stone hearth. Sunlight, thick with dancing dust motes, falls in a golden patch on the wide pine floorboards. In a rocking chair, a young mother sits with her firstborn child. The world outside is a place of hard work and uncertainty, but in this small, sunlit room, there is only peace. The mother's voice is not strong, but it is steady, and the lullaby she hums is a simple, wordless tune, a melody passed down from her own mother and her mother before that. It is a sound of pure, unconditional love. The hum rises and falls with the gentle rhythm of the rocking chair and the slow, deep breaths of the sleeping infant in her arms. The house listens to this sound. It absorbs it into its very bones. The new, raw wood of the walls, still smelling faintly of the forest, soaks up the melody. For years, this lullaby will be the house's foundational note, the first layer of its memory. It will be hummed over new cradles, sung to soothe fevers in the dead of night, and whispered to chase away the fears of a thunderstorm. It is the sound of safety, of beginnings, of the quiet, fierce love that turns four walls and a roof into a home. Even now, in the silent, empty ruin, if you stand in that same spot where the sun still falls, you can feel the ghost of that melody, a gentle, soothing vibration that still lives deep within the wood. As the years pass, other sounds join the lullaby. The house remembers the sharp, bright notes of laughter. Listen, and you can hear it. It is the sound of children, their bare feet thundering on the floorboards as they chase each other in a game of tag. It is the sound of their delighted shrieks as their father, home from the fields, lifts them high into the air, their small bodies light as feathers. Later, the laughter deepens. It becomes the shared chuckle of the husband and wife sitting by the fire after the children are asleep, their hands clasped, their silence as comfortable as their conversation. It is the boisterous, full-throated laughter of a harvest feast, the long wooden table crowded with neighbors, the room filled with the warm glow of a dozen candles and the rich smells of roasted turkey and apple pie. The house holds this laughter in the grain of the wood, in the soot-stained bricks of the chimney. The laughter filled its empty spaces, polished its floors with joy, and made its windows shine from the inside out. It was the sound of a family thriving, of a life being fully lived. And with the laughter came the quiet, steady rhythm of prayer. This sound was as regular as the rising and setting of the sun. It was the low murmur of the father's voice, reading a psalm from the heavy family Bible before bed, his words a comforting blanket against the darkness. It was the silent, personal prayer of a mother kneeling by her child's bedside, her lips moving without a sound, a plea for health and happiness. It was the simple, heartfelt grace said over every meal, a quiet acknowledgement of gratitude for the bounty of the land. This house was built on a foundation of prayer. The The words of faith and supplication soaked into the plaster, settled into the mortar between the stones of the hearth. Prayer was the house's anchor in a world that was often frightening and uncertain. It was the sound of a family acknowledging a power greater than themselves, a sound of humility and of hope. The echo of these prayers gave the house its feeling of peace, a sense of sanctuary that lingers even now in its slow decay. But a house that remembers laughter and prayer must also remember sorrow. The walls that held so much joy could not keep out the quiet heartbreak that is a part of every life. The hum of the house has its minor keys, its notes of deep, aching sadness. Listen, and you can hear it. It is the sound of a door closing for the last time. It is the sound of a son, now a young man, shouldering a musket and marching off to a war that will divide the nation and the state of Virginia itself. The house remembers the silence that followed his departure, a silence heavier and more profound than any that had come before. It remembers the mother standing at an upstairs window for hours, for days, watching the empty road, her silent prayers now tinged with a desperate, fearful urgency. The house also remembers the oppressive quiet of a sick room. It remembers the winter a fever came, a merciless visitor that would not be turned away. It holds the echo of a child's labored breathing, the sound of a father's helpless, choked sobs in the dark hallway, and the final, terrible silence when the struggle was over. That heartbreak did not fade. It became a permanent part of the house, a cold spot in the upstairs bedroom that the sun could never quite warm, a creak in the floorboards that sounded like a sigh of grief. The years turned and the sounds began to fade. The laughter grew older, then quieter. The lullabies were sung by new mothers, but with a little less frequency. The prayers were still said, but the voices were frail. The final heartbreak was the sound of the house slowly emptying, the sound of a wagon being loaded, of the last grandchildren now grown moving away to the cities, to a new world of industry and speed that had no place for a simple farmhouse. And so it stands today, a silent library of a forgotten American life. The wind moves through its empty window frames, but it is not just the wind you hear. It is the ghost of a lullaby. The rain drips from the sagging roof, but the rhythm is the echo of a child's running footsteps. The old wood groans in the night, but it is the memory of a family's shared laughter and its quiet, enduring grief. The house remembers it all, and in its remembering, it still hums, a soft, complex, and beautiful song of the forgotten hours, a final, gentle lullaby for a world that has long since passed it by.
Let us leave the quiet, memory-filled house in the east with its gentle hum of lullabies and its settled, patient sorrows. Our journey tonight takes us away from the world of roots and foundations and propels us across the continent on a current of feverish hope. We travel to a time when the very landscape of America seemed to shimmer with an impossible promise, a time when the rivers stopped murmuring of their ancient journey to the sea and began instead to speak of gold. It did not begin as a fact. It began as a whisper, a rumor carried on the same winds that had once carried the stories of the first peoples. But this was a new kind of story. It was a tale of a land so rich that its very streams were lined with treasure, a place where a man could dip a simple pan into the water and pull out a fortune. The story traveled faster than any post rider, faster than any steamship. It was a fever that spread not through contact, but through the imagination. It was the dream of a golden future,
and it was powerful enough to make men abandon the solid reality of their lives to chase a mere reflection. Imagine a young man, let's call him Ethan, working as a clerk in a dusty Boston law office. His world is one of predictable rhythms. His days are measured by the slow tick of the office clock and the scratch of his pen on dry legal documents. He has a good life, a safe life. He has a home, a family, the promise of a slow, steady climb up a well-worn ladder. But one evening, he reads a story in the newspaper, a second-hand account from a faraway land called California. The words seem to lift off the page. Nuggets the size of a man's thumb, rivers with beds of pure gold. That night, as he lies in his familiar bed, the ticking of the clock sounds different. It is no longer a sound of steady progress, but a sound of time being wasted. The solid walls of his room feel less like a shelter and more like a cage. In his mind's eye, he sees a river, not the dark, busy Charles River of his city, but a crystal-clear stream tumbling down from a sun-drenched mountain. And in that stream, he sees a glint, a flash of light, a reflection of the sun that is also something more. It is the reflection of a new life, a life of freedom and boundless possibility, a golden future he can hold in the palm of his hand. He is not a pioneer, carefully planning to move his family and his home. He is a dreamer, and dreamers travel light. He leaves not with a heavy heart, but with a heart made impossibly light by hope. He sells what little he owns, says his hurried goodbyes, and joins a great restless river of other men, all drawn by the same shimmering reflection. They were a new kind of traveler. They did not measure time in footsteps, but in the frantic beat of their own hopeful hearts. They moved across the land with a desperate speed, their eyes not on the beauty of the landscape, but on the horizon, always the horizon, where the golden dream lay waiting. They crossed 1,000 streams. For the pioneers who came before them, a stream was a challenge, a place to water their oxen, a boundary to be crossed. For these dreamers, every stream was an audition. At every creek and river they would stop, their hands trembling, and scoop up a pan of gravel and sand. They would swish the water, their eyes wide with anticipation, watching as the heavier materials settled. They were not looking at the water, they were looking through it, searching for that telltale glint, the reflection that would tell them their search was over. But the stream would only offer back the reflection of their own eager, sunburnt faces before they moved on, always on, to the next river that might speak the magic word. They climbed over hills, not the gentle green hills of Virginia, but the hard, sun-baked hills of the West. They did not climb them to build a home or to gaze at the view. They climbed them to see what lay on the other side. Each summit was a moment of breathless hope, a chance to survey the next valley, the next canyon, the next river that might be the one. The landscape was not a home, it was a map, a great, frustrating puzzle, and they believed gold was the key that would unlock it all. They crossed deserts, vast, silent places where the sun was a merciless white-hot eye. Here the dream became a mirage. The heat would play tricks on their vision, making the sand in the distance shimmer like a lake of water. The tiny flecks of mica in the rock would catch the light and glitter with a false promise, a cruel imitation of the gold they sought. The desert was the dream made manifest, a vast, beautiful, and utterly empty promise that always receded just as you neared. And then, finally, Ethan arrives. He stands on the bank of a river in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. It is the place he has seen in his dreams for months, but the reality is a shock. The water is not crystal clear. It is a muddy, brown torrent, its banks torn apart by the frantic work of 1,000 other men. The air is not silent. It is filled with the clang of shovels against rock, the splash of water, and the low, constant murmur of desperate, hopeful voices speaking a dozen different languages. He wades into the river. The water is so cold it is a physical pain, a shock that travels up from his feet and into the marrow of his bones. This is the first touch of reality against the warm skin of his dream. He fills his pan with heavy, wet gravel. The work is not the easy, magical gesture he had imagined. It is a back-breaking, repetitive toil. His muscles scream. His hands grow numb in the icy water. Hour after hour he scoops, he swishes, he stares into the muddy swirl with his eyes burning with concentration. For days he finds nothing. The reflection he had chased across a continent has vanished. The river does not speak of gold. It speaks only of cold and mud and the crushing weight of his own foolishness. The golden future he had imagined, the life of ease and freedom, begins to feel like a distant, childish fantasy. And then, one afternoon, as he performs the ritual for the 1,000th time, he sees it. At the bottom of his pan, as the last of the black sand washes away, there is a tiny speck of color. It is no bigger than a grain of sand, but its gleam is unmistakable. It is gold. His heart leaps. The dream which had almost died is instantly reborn in that tiny, heavy flake. But it is a different kind of dream now. It is no longer the grand, effortless fantasy. It is a small, hard-won reality. He finds another flake the next day, a few more the week after. It is just enough to buy his flour and his bacon. It is just enough to keep the flame of hope from being extinguished completely. He has found gold, but he has not found the golden future he was promised. That future, he comes to realize, was the reflection. It was the morning mist. It was a beautiful, shimmering thing that had no substance, a dream that could not survive the harsh, cold light of the river at noon. He and thousands of men like him had chased a whisper. They had mistaken the reflection of their own hope for a promise from the land. The rivers had never spoken of gold. They had only ever spoken the language of water and stone, and the dreamers had simply heard what they wanted to hear. As you settle into the quiet of the night, think of these dreamers. Their frantic, hopeful energy was a brief, bright flash in the long, slow story of the land. The gold they found was real, but the true treasure was elusive. The golden future they sought melted away like the morning mist, leaving behind the simple, hard reality of a man, a river, and the quiet dignity of a day's labor. Their story is a gentle reminder that the most glittering dreams are often the most fleeting, and that sometimes the chase itself is the only real prize.
Let us pull our gaze back now, from the individual dreamer by the golden river to the grand, collective dream of empire. For every man who chased a personal fortune, there was a king who chased a continent, a crown that saw in the vast, uncharted spaces of America a new jewel for its collection. Empires, like the men who build them, are driven by a powerful dream, a dream of glory, of dominion, of a future etched in their own image. But even empires sleep. Their slumber does not come with a sudden crash. It is not a fortress being stormed or a king being overthrown in a single violent moment. The midnight of empires is a slow, creeping twilight. It is a gradual softening, a slow release of a once unshakable grip. It is the work of time, history's most patient storyteller, a narrator that does not speak in words, but in the slow erosion of stone, the fading of ink, and the patient, unstoppable return of the forest. Imagine a fortress on a hill, somewhere in the misty hills of what is now upstate New York. It was built of stone and ambition, its walls cut and placed by soldiers who spoke the king's English, its cannons pointed out at a sea of green wilderness. It was an anchor for a mighty empire, a declaration in stone that this land, this forest, this future belonged to a distant crown across the sea. Its flag, a bold pattern of crosses, was a daily argument against the vast, untamed sky. But the flag is gone now. The soldiers have long since marched away, their red coats a fading memory on a forgotten road. The fortress still stands, but it is no longer a sentinel of power. It is a ruin, and it is dreaming. Ivy, a slow green tide, has climbed its stone walls, softening their sharp military angles. Moss, thick and velvety, has carpeted the parade ground where boots once stamped in perfect, disciplined rhythm. A sapling, a defiant whisper of life, has taken root in the crack of a parapet. The cannons still point out at the forest, but their iron throats are now choked with rust and rainwater. They have not fired a shot in 200 years. They are no longer weapons. They are merely perches for small, chirping birds. The barracks, their roofs long since collapsed, are now just stone foundations, their rooms filled not with the sound of soldiers' songs, but with the rustle of dry leaves and the scurry of small wild things. The empire that built this fortress has not been vanquished by another army. It has simply been outlasted. Its grand dream of a continent held in its grip crumbled under the soft, unstoppable weight of a million tiny growing things, of vines and roots and the quiet, persistent work of the seasons. The fortress has not fallen. It has been absorbed. The only sovereign here is the patient green kingdom of the forest, and the stone walls are now just another feature of the landscape, sleeping under the same sun and moon that have watched over this hill for millennia. Drift south and west now, across the vast plains, to the sun-baked land of California. Here, along a dusty road, stands another kind of imperial dream. It is a mission, its walls built not of stone, but of the earth itself, of adobe bricks, the color of the surrounding hills. A bell that once called hundreds to prayer now hangs silent in its tower, its metal tongue coated in a patina of green. This, too, was the outpost of an empire, a Spanish crown that sought to conquer not just with the sword, but with the cross. Its ambition was to remake the soul of the land, to bring a new faith and a new way of life to a world that had its own ancient traditions. The priests in their dark robes walked these colonnades, their Latin chants a strange new music in the warm, dry air. The frescoes they painted on the church walls, now faded to the faintest pastels, told stories from a world half a globe away. But the empire that sent them has receded like the tide, leaving its missions like seashells on the shore. The grand purpose has faded. The urgent work of conversion has given way to the quiet work of memory. The chants are gone, replaced by the whisper of wind through the cracked roof tiles and the cooing of doves who have built their nests in the bell tower. The mission is no longer an instrument of power. It is a quiet dream the land is having about a time of faith and conquest. The names on the map, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Sacramento, remain like tombstones of this sleeping empire, their original meaning softened by time, their imperial context forgotten. The mighty Spanish crown has laid its head down to rest, its grand colonial project now just a beautiful, crumbling echo under the warm California sun. And what of the power of the word, the authority of the seal? In a dusty archive in a quiet library, A clerk opens a heavy, leather-bound book. Inside, protected from the light, is a treaty, a piece of parchment from the time when France dreamed of a vast, unbroken empire stretching down the spine of the continent. The words are still there, written in an elegant looping script. They are words of immense power and consequence, dividing up the land, drawing lines on a map that ignored the mountains and rivers, making promises and threats in the name of a king. And at the bottom is the seal, a meaningless pattern in brittle red wax and a signature that is now just a faint, spidery scrawl. The clerk looks at the document and it is like looking at a photograph of a ghost. The king is long dead. The empire is a chapter in a history book. The vast territory it claimed has been sold, divided, and settled into a shape the king could never have imagined. The paper itself is the only thing that remains, a fragile relic. The power it once held has completely evaporated, dissolved by the soft, unstoppable passage of time. The mighty proclamations, the ironclad laws, the threats of royal displeasure have all fallen silent, their voices no more than a dry rustle of ancient paper. And beneath it all, a deeper midnight. Before the empires of Europe cast their long shadows across the continent, other powers rose and fell. The great earthworks of the Mississippians, mounds as large as hills, still sleep beneath the grassy plains of the Ohio Valley, their purpose a mystery, the names of their kings utterly forgotten. The silent cliff dwellings of the ancestral Puebloans in the desert southwest are cities of ghosts, their midnight having fallen 1,000 years ago. Their slumber is the deepest of all. Their empires crumbled not under the weight of other armies, but under the slow, inexorable pressures of drought and change. They too had their dreams, their power, their certainty, and they too were told by time, the most patient storyteller, that nothing lasts forever. So it is that even empires sleep. The land remembers them all. The old British fort, the Spanish mission, the French treaty, the ancient native mounds are all layers in the deep, rich soil of American history. The story of this land is a story of arrivals and departures, of loud awakenings and long, quiet slumbers. As you drift now toward your own sleep, think of this long, slow rhythm. The mighty crowns and colonies have all laid their heads down to rest, their roars and proclamations softened into the gentle, rhythmic breathing of the sleeping land. Their midnight is not an end, but a transformation. It is the moment when their loud, insistent story finally becomes a quiet, gentle part of the larger, more ancient story of the earth itself. It is a final, humbling lullaby for the proud and the powerful, a soft reminder that all greatness, in the end, must surrender to the soft, unstoppable weight of time.
And so, the great empires have laid their heads down to rest, their grand ambitions now just a soft, low murmur in the long, slow dream of the land. The night has grown deeper. The moon is higher in the sky, its light a silver wash on the sleeping world. Our journey through the forgotten hours is drawing to a close, and it has brought us, at last, back to here, back to now, back to you. You are in your own quiet room, in your own comfortable bed. The air is still. The day, with all its noise and hurry, is a distant memory. This is your time, your silence. But after all our travels through the centuries, perhaps you can feel that this silence is not empty. It is layered. It is an ocean of quiet, and we have only been exploring its deepest, most hidden currents. Now, as you float on its surface, on the verge of your own sleep, you can feel the gentle pull of all that lies beneath. This is the hour that still remains. It is the present moment, this soft pause between waking and dreaming. And it is the inheritor of all the hours that have come before. They are not gone. They are simply quiet, and they are here with you now. Listen, beneath the familiar modern sounds of your home, the soft hum of a distant appliance, the whisper of air through a vent, the rhythmic beat of your own heart, can you hear another, older rhythm? It is the gentle rocking lullaby of the silent harbor. The floorboards beneath your bed may not be the timbers of a 17th century ship, but they rest on a foundation which rests on the earth, the same earth that first felt the weary footsteps of those who disembarked from those creaking, sighing vessels. The deep, patient rhythm of the tide, the first lullaby of this continent's new beginning, is a vibration that still exists in the soil, a foundational note in the great, quiet song of the land. And feel the air in your room. It is cool and still. As you breathe in and then out, you are breathing the same air that once fed the flames of a revolution. The quiet courage that burned like candlelight did not extinguish. It became a part of the atmosphere. The determination of the printer setting his dangerous words, the steadfast love of the woman mending a soldier's coat by the hearth, the shared secret hope of men gathered around a shielded lantern, that energy did not vanish. It was released into the world, a warmth that still lingers in the darkest nights of our own time, a quiet, invisible light that is part of the very air you breathe. The journey you take when you close your eyes and wander in your mind is a path walked by millions before you. Every road of dust and destiny, every worn boot print and wagon track has left a faint, indelible impression on the landscape. The concrete and asphalt of the modern world have paved over these old roads, but they have not erased them. The memory of the journey remains. The slow, patient rhythm of a life measured in footsteps, not clocks, is a tempo that the land has never forgotten. When you feel a restless urge to move, to see what is over the next hill, you are feeling the echo of that great westward flowing current, the ghost of a wagon wheel still turning in the soul of the nation. And what of the words that were never spoken, the letters that were never sent? The quiet heartbreak and the profound love that faded into the soil or turned to ash in a fireplace did not disappear. They became a part of the earth's deep emotional memory. The land remembers the soldier's dream of a small house by the creek. It remembers the mother's prayer for her son's safety. When you feel a sudden, unexplained wave of melancholy on a quiet evening, or a surge of love for someone far away, perhaps you are simply brushing up against one of these lost whispers, a forgotten story of the heart that the wind has carried, at last, to you. Every old building you have ever passed, every ancient tree you have ever stood beneath, holds a similar library of echoes. The house that remembered is not alone in its vigil. Every place has its own hum. The land you sleep on tonight has its own lullabies, its own echoes of laughter and prayer and quiet sorrow. We live our lives in the thin, sunlit layer of the present, but we are walking, always, on a deep, rich soil of accumulated time, of forgotten lives. Even the dreams of gold have not entirely faded. The shimmering, impossible hope that drove men to chase reflections is still a part of the American story. It is there in every new venture, in every bold idea, in every time we dare to risk the comfortable reality of today for the glittering promise of tomorrow. That feverish, hopeful energy settled in the riverbeds and the canyons, a permanent glint in the nation's eye, a reminder that sometimes the dream, even if it melts away like morning mist, is a journey worth taking. And the great empires in their deep, final sleep have given the land its sense of layered, complex peace. Their crumbling fortresses and missions have become a part of the landscape, their stories a soft, low harmony in the background of our own. Their midnight reminds us that all things, even the mightiest, must eventually soften, surrender, and find their rest. Their quiet slumber gives the night its depth, its texture, its profound and humbling sense of perspective. And so we arrive at the end of our journey. The hour that still remains is yours. As you finally close your eyes, remember that you are not shutting the world out, but letting the deeper world in. Your own quiet night, your own forgotten hours of sleep are now becoming part of the story. Your own dreams are weaving themselves into the great tapestry of the sleeping land. You are a part of the long, unbroken thread. The courage of the settlers, the wisdom of the first peoples, the hope of the revolutionaries, the love of the letter writers, the endurance of the pioneers, all of it is your inheritance. It is in the ground beneath you, the air around you, and the quiet, dreaming chambers of your own heart. So let the gentle weight of time be a comforting blanket. Let the echoes of the past be a soothing lullaby. You are safe here in this quiet moment, a keeper of the story. Every quiet night, every forgotten hour is still part of the grand, beautiful, and ever unfolding story that built this sleeping land. Now, sleep.